change what you see. We don't need no crowds, no picket signs, just follow me. Get up off your seat and change what you see. You don't need no signs, no marching shoes, just follow me. Get for change into the darkness. Don't be afraid what you see. Won't come out until we're righteous. Time to change up the beat. We've been dancing a red line. Anchors falling in the streets. Make our strength and numbers increase. We say yes and we say no. Only way for me to get my freedom. We say when and we say how. Yes, it's time for us to break way clean. We say yes and we say no. Only way for me to get my freedom. We say when and we say how. Yes, it's time for us to break way clean. Follow me out to the front lines. Follow me down to DC. Follow me out of the madness. I am you and you are me. Lead us now away from the violence. Take the lead out of our feet. We've been sidelined bearing witness of your game. Lace up your cleats. Get for change into the darkness. Don't be afraid what you see. Won't come out until we're righteous. Time to change up the beat. We've been dancing a red line. Anchors falling in the streets. Make our strength and numbers increase. We say yes and we say no. Only way for me to get my freedom. We say when and we say how. Yes, it's time for us to break way clean. We say yes and we say no. Only way for me to get my freedom. We say when and we say how. Yes, it's time for us to break way clean. Get my change into the darkness. Don't be afraid what you see. Won't come out until we're righteous. Time to change up the beat. We've been dancing a red line. Anchors falling in the streets. Make our strength and numbers increase. We say yes and we say no. Only way for me to get my freedom. We say when and we say how. Yes, it's time for us to break way clean. We say yes and we say no. Only way for me to get my freedom. We say when and we say how. Yes, it's time for us to break way clean.
Hola, los organizadores del evento de hoy tienen la firme determinación de crear un espacio multilingüe y con esa finalidad contamos con interpretación disponible en español e inglés. Al terminar este anuncio, activaremos la función de interpretación y si usted está usando la aplicación Zoom, podrá ver el icono de un mundo en la parte de abajo de su pantalla. Haga un clic en el icono del mundo para escuchar la interpretación y seleccione español. Si usted está usando la aplicación Zoom desde su teléfono, haga clic en los 3 puntitos donde dice More. Seleccione Language Interpretation y después español. Si tiene algún problema al hacer esto, por favor escriba un comentario en el chat. Gracias. Hi, the organizers of today's event have a strong commitment to creating a multilingual space. To that end, we have interpretation available in Spanish and English and ASL. We ask that all participants speak slowly, loudly, and clearly into the microphones. Right after this announcement, we will activate the interpretation feature. And if you are using the Zoom application, you will see a globe icon at the bottom of your screen. To listen to interpretation, click on the globe and select English. If you're using Zoom on your phone, click on the 3 dots where it says More. Choose Language Interpretation and select English. If you have any problems doing this, please comment in the chat box. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. We wanted to set up interpretation. We have interpretation set up for you for tonight. If you would like to have American Sign Language interpreters visible, you must pin the interpreters. Joining us tonight providing ASL interpretation, we will have two interpreters, ASL Kulashanda, as well as Anthony. Kulashanda and Anthony will take intervals of 15 minutes to provide interpretation. Once the 15 minutes are done, the interpreters will sign at the end of a thought. The interpreters will switch. That is to give you a cue to pin the next interpreter, and it'll give you enough time to find the next interpreter once they appear and go ahead and pin them for the remaining of that interval so that you might have better visibility of the interpreter. Thank you.
Buenas tardes a todos los asistentes. ¿Cómo han estado esta semana? Gracias a todos los candidatos presentes y a todas las personas por participar en este foro virtual sobre la educación culturalmente receptiva 2021. Mi nombre es Lucía Díaz, soy colombiana. Soy líder del Comité de Padres de CEJ Camino Nueva York y líder del CEJ. Tengo una hija en una escuela pública, John Baum, y está en 10º grado. El CEJ es un conjunto de organizaciones dirigidas por padres que viven en las diferentes comunidades de la ciudad de Nueva York, que luchan por una justicia educativa a favor de la equidad y a la excelente educación de calidad completa para todos los niños de las escuelas públicas de la ciudad de Nueva York. Queremos presentarles hoy a nuestras organizaciones miembros del CEJ, May the Road Nueva York, el Comité de Padres de Acción de Bronx, la Alianza por una Educación de Calidad y AMAS. El CEJ en este tiempo ha logrado que la ciudad de Nueva York aportara 23 millones de dólares para los entrenamientos para maestros y personal escolar sobre el antirracismo. Hemos logrado que el DOE cambiara la lista de libros para la educación de nuestros hijos y así hacerlos diversos. También hemos logrado que el DOE se comprometiera a comprar currículos nuevos que sean culturalmente receptivos. Asimismo, el CEJ logró que el DOE pasara una política de panel educacional de que es una educación culturalmente receptiva. El CEJ logró la expansión de las escuelas comunitarias en la ciudad de Nueva York. Es importante que nuestros hijos tengan conocimiento de las diferentes culturas existentes, teniendo en cuenta que la ciudad de Nueva York tiene diversidad cultural. Cuando yo llegué a este país, a los Estados Unidos, no vi representada nuestra cultura latina. Y observé que el 41% de los estudiantes latinos estaban en las escuelas públicas de la ciudad de Nueva York. Pero solo el 4% de los libros de las escuelas públicas son autores latinos. Y el 8% tienen caracteres principales. Son latinos en estos libros. Asimismo, hay que enseñarles el respeto a todas las personas, a no hacer bullying, no al racismo, respetar las leyes, verse reflejado y amar sus raíces hispanas y a tener una excelente educación y de calidad. Señores candidatos, hoy podemos contar con ustedes para que se cumpla esta propuesta. Y les recuerdo también que el CEJ se va a asegurar que ustedes cumplan con sus compromisos con la educación culturalmente receptiva. Gracias. Le paso la palabra a nuestra compañera Natasha.
Hello, everyone. I am Natasha Capers, the director of the New York City Coalition for Educational Justice and a parent of two amazing public high school students. We are all public school proud. And I use all pronouns said in dignity, respect, love, and humanity. We'd like to start off the day by acknowledging that we are on stolen land and recognize the plight of our Indigenous and Native brothers, sisters, and family who continue to fight for their right to exist, land rights, and basic human rights. We currently stand on Lenape stolen land. Would also like to take the moment to honor our Indigenous ancestors, our land and water protectors, and our Mother Earth, and hope that we can all collectively engage in reflection and commit to understanding the long-standing and violent history of where we currently stand. But we need to ask ourselves, what is our place within that history? Land acknowledgement is not something of the past or just historical, but it's something ongoing. Colonialism continues to exist, and we need to understand how we perpetuate it. We've included a link that will show up in the chat so that you can continue to learn more about the original people of this continent. We hope that you can continue to carry these conversations on with your school communities and within your own family. And more importantly, that we continue to honor and respect Indigenous people. We also want to acknowledge that today was selected for the forum because it holds deep significance, being R.G. Lord and Toni Morrison's birthday. Lord and Morrison are two of the most important writers in womanist literature and Black feminist theory, and were both born today in 1934 and 1931. They are clear and beautiful examples of why we must make curriculum more culturally responsive, as most students today and even before them have never learned about these two important figures in our history. And happy Black History Month. So, some rules of engagement for us all. So, we believe deeply in community and want to hear all voices. So the chat is open, and we hope that it will be an active place for conversation, resources, jokes, laughter, joy, and ideas. But if there's any harmful, abusive, or demeaning language in the chat, we will remove that person and disable the chat feature. Abuse and violence of any kind will not be tolerated in this space. And now some rules of engagement for our candidates. This is not the space for glossy words or catchphrases like all children can learn, or that education is a priority, or that education is the key to the future. This audience already knows and believes this deeply and embodies it in every way possible. We want, need, deserve, and expect deep, thoughtful, truthful answers to all of the questions. We want to hear your ideas, your plans, and how you plan to pay for them as well. Let us be clear. Tonight is centered on racial justice in schools and culturally responsive education. We are asking a lot of you in a short amount of time. And that is because our communities cannot and will not wait any longer for what is rightfully theirs. Tonight, all of the questions asked have been crafted by and will be asked by Black, Brown, immigrant, and Indigenous parents, a student, and an educator. Candidates, please make sure to rename yourselves with your full name and with your pronouns. And let's make sure that we respect everyone else's pronouns. And that's a rule for us all. So we're about to get started. So for first opening remarks, Candidates will have 1 minute to give a response to a question that will be posed by our co-moderator, Lucia Diaz. If you go over, you will be muted. There is a timekeeper, and we also suggest that you kind of keep your own time. We do suggest that you pin the timekeeper as she will give warnings. In the second part of tonight, there will be 5 questions asked. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to each question. If you go over, you will be muted. And then if time permits, we will have a round of yes, no questions for a lightning round. Yes, no questions. So let's get into this. So quickly introduce our candidates. We're really excited. So, and I think everyone is here. I can't see it right now. I can't see the whole list. So I hope everyone's here. First, we have Eric Adams, Brooklyn Borough President. We're also joined by Maya Wiley, former counsel to Mayor de Blasio. Diane Morales, former executive director of Phipps, New York. Carlos Menchaca, New York City Council member for Brooklyn's 38th District. Paperboy Prince, artist and former candidate for 5th Congressional District. Sean Donovan, former director of the U.S. Office of Management and Budget. Catherine Garcia, former New York City Sanitation Commissioner. And last but most certainly not least, Quanda Francis, former crime analyst. Thank you for joining us tonight. We welcome you. And for your first question, the way I read your names is the order in which you will answer. So I am going to turn it over to Lucia to start us off.
Bueno, vamos a conversar con nuestros candidatos. Ahora vamos a hacer la primera pregunta a nuestros candidatos y tienen 1 minuto para responder y vamos a utilizar el orden ya estipulado. La pregunta es, ¿cuál es su conexión personal con la educación culturalmente receptiva, ya sea como estudiante, como padre o de otra manera? Le damos la palabra al candidato Eric Adams.
The first question is from me, correct?
Yes,
Yes.
you may start your 1 minute.
Culturally relevant education is crucial for me, and it goes back to childhood. I remember sitting in the school, PS 140 in Queens, where I grew up. And I came in and was explaining to the teacher about why I was late. And she smacked me, and she smacked me hard. And I often reflected and thought about that. The school was 100% white teachers. They didn't understand the difficulties and challenges that I was experiencing as a young man when my mother was raising 6 children. And oftentimes, if you don't take into account the full personhood of our children, of what they go through, how they communicate, you're not going to effectively understand how to educate them. And that is my personal experience.
Next, we'll have Maya Wiley.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And let me just start by saying I went to, in my early years, a Black segregated school that was overcrowded and underfunded with Black teachers who were struggling. And they did not have the tools for a culturally responsible education. But as a parent with my own kids in public schools, I watched my older daughter struggle in a middle school that was a high stakes tested middle school that was simply crushed out of her the love of creative writing because it wasn't responsive enough. So the high school we picked was an open admission high school. It was a transfer high school. It was one that had no admissions policies other than you wanted to go. But it was because of the tour where we saw on the shelf Alice Walker, and we saw in the history curriculum the Haitian Revolution. And as the daughter of civil rights activists, I wanted my kids not to have to learn the way I did on my own after school, what this country and this world has been about. Thank you.
I believe Diane Morales is still trying to get in, and we will get her in shortly, but we'll throw it to Carlos Menchaca.
Thank you, Natasha. Y buenas tardes to everyone. I'm Carlos Menchaca, and this question is really personal to me as someone who is openly gay and Mexican. The communities that I am connected to are rarely part of our books. And as someone who grew up gay and it was not easy, I would have loved to have seen stories growing up about two princes. For example, there's this book about two princes that could have just shown me that it was okay to be gay. It was so hard to come out in high school. This is not an easy, it's never easy. But when I think about kids who are right now in a gender fluid space of expression, so much of what they're experiencing is never reflected back to them. That needs to change. And this is why I stand with you as a city council member. I've been with you at rallies, and I'm going to stay with you as mayor. Thank you.
Paperboy Prince.
Paper, yeah. It's our time. One love. So happy to be with you here this evening. This topic, affected my life a lot as a kid growing up, just, being different and trying to express myself. I played on the basketball team, which was fun and, had a lot of things that came with it socially in school. And one of our coaches and my teacher was actually shot during the year and killed ultimately. And grappling with that as a kid at 14 years old, trying to figure out, make sense of all of that. We didn't have the classes, we didn't have the mental health professionals, we didn't have the love that really allows us to, come together and make it, the things that we need. So for me, finding ways to add more love, more compassion into our schools is super important.
Thank you. Sean Donovan.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you for dropping that opening on us. So much knowledge. Thank you. My own experience comes from growing up in this city as a son of an immigrant who grew up in Costa Rica and Lima, Peru, whose first language was Spanish, but was able to come to this city and find opportunity. And at the same time, I saw so many people sleeping on our streets. I saw communities like the South Bronx burning. And I asked myself why. I started volunteering in a homeless shelter in college. I went to work for the National Coalition for the Homeless. And let me tell you what I found. I found young people, overwhelmingly kids of color, half of them LGBTQIA+, who are homeless with the same experience of my dad, except for one thing. They were not white and named Donovan. And I came to understand how much the experience of homelessness, of opportunity is shaped by what we teach our kids and how we teach them in our schools. I ended up being President Obama.
So sorry. I told you the time goes by quick. Catherine Garcia.
Thank you, Natasha. And thank you for your intro. So, as a woman who was adopted into a multiracial family, and as a parent of two children who are half Puerto Rican, with a sister who is a teacher in DOE, culturally responsive education is about celebrating my family. And I did not see that growing up in New York City public schools. And it wasn't until college that I actually was handed books that were written by Black authors or by women, and that we were talking about the role that women and people of color had played. We don't celebrate that in our city today. And I think that we need to make sure that is at the core so that everyone's story is being told and we actually have more empathy and more love for everyone in New York City. Thank you.
Kwanda.
Right in. So positive experience. Elementary school, PS 67, which is the first African-American free school in New York City. Amazing educators. And I I believe they instilled in me, helped instill in me the point that I mattered. Or, we learned about Black authors. Our curriculum was enriched in the fact that, hey, you are a part of a legacy. And I think that resonates with me today, because regardless of what happened when I got in high school, the foundation was there in middle school, and the foundation was there in elementary school. Because when I left my elementary school, I went to Satellite West, which was another great middle school with amazing African-American teachers, or just, diverse. And again, culturally enriched education was all we were immersed in. And so very positive experience there.
Thank you to everyone. I'm going to turn it back over to Lucia, but just a reminder, for this next round, each answer will have 2 minutes. Each candidate will have 2 minutes. Someone will drop the question and the order of the candidates, how they should answer, into the chat feature.
Gracias. Continuamos con las preguntas para nuestros candidatos. La educación culturalmente receptiva y sostenida y adquisiciones. Creación de planes de estudio. Escuchemos a nuestra compañera Verónica de la organización de masa.
Hola, muy buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Verónica Morales. Tengo 2 hijos. Soy madre líder de Masa Padres en Acción en el sur del Bronx y también soy miembro de la Coalición por la Justicia Educativa. Esta tarde nos gustaría escuchar su postura, porque en el 2019 CEJ lanzó una campaña para empujar un plan de estudios culturalmente receptivos. El Departamento de Educación apoyó. Debido a COVID, esos compromisos no se cumplieron. Como alcalde, lanzará un plan dentro de sus primeros 100 días para que el plan de estudios de Nueva York sea culturalmente receptivo en cada clase, cada día, en cada grado.
We will start with Maya, followed by Maya Wally, followed by Catherine Garcia, and the rest of the order is in the chat.
Yes, I will. And I will because it is what a quality education requires. And our kids have lost a year. And part of what that means is we have to re-engage them and engage them in a place that excites them about learning. That means a lot of different things, by the way. So one, we need counselors, not cops in our schools. We need to create supportive environments of student support. We need to ensure that we have, and I already have in my gun violence prevention plan, making sure that we have trauma-informed care for our students. But we also have to continue to work on diversifying our teachers so that they look like our students, and that we have more materials in the classroom and curricula that is responsive to the lived experiences of our students in the classroom, and that they're seeing represented their own history and their own cultural expression, but they're also learning those of others. And so I will make sure we're prioritizing that, and I will continue to invest in teacher training as well, so that we're continuing to support the development of that. And we also have to make sure that we have more engagement from all of our parents, and that our schools are places of community engagement, because that's part of how we become more responsive and responsible to all of the diversity that's in our communities and all of the expression and learning and smarts and innovation that come from our communities, because we need to bring that into our school buildings as well. Thank you.
So I believe I am next. So I will absolutely, in my first 100 days, launch a plan to ensure that we have a culturally responsive curriculum. But I actually think it needs to go beyond this. In the 21st century, being bilingual is actually a huge plus, not a negative. And we need to ensure that there is language, foreign language education, starting in elementary school. We should not be waiting for middle school and for high school. We need to be looking at what books are in the school library. Who are they by? What are the stories that they're telling? How are we sourcing and contracting with providers for after-school programs, for enrichment programs? It needs to be completely holistic. And particularly in this next year, we all know that students have experienced significant trauma and need to be met where they are, both so that they have an opportunity to see themselves in all of the great art and culture, but we are embedding mental health support for them to ensure that they can learn. You know, they will be struggling in this next year, because we just saw some terrible suicides happening with students in the DOE because they are so isolated. We have to stop that and ensure that they are healthy and safe and getting the education that they need. So I am committed to incorporating that curriculum into the DOE as we move forward. Thank you.
Saya Morales, you're next.
Hi, apologies for being late, y'all. It's a pleasure to be here. So yes, I absolutely commit to dramatically increasing the cultural responsiveness of our schools. I have committed to executing an education equity executive order within the first 100 days of my administration that would move towards desegregating schools, that will move towards implementing culturally responsive schools curriculum. I have also, one of the things I want to take a half step back for a second. One of the things I've talked about publicly is the idea that we can't teach our schools, our students in our schools, if our students don't feel loved and respected and valued and seen. And that is a critical part of my plan. In addition to implementing the culturally responsive curriculum and education, we also need to increase dramatically and expand the number of teachers that look like our children and that understand our children linguistically and culturally. And that means that we have to expand the pipeline of teacher training so that we are increasing access. And that is what I have done throughout my entire career. I have built programs to create pipelines for low-income Black and Brown folks to have access to opportunity, whether that be in healthcare or in education. We also need to think about how it is that we engage and bring in our parents and our communities. No one wants to state the obvious right now, right? The system actually blames Black and Brown parents for the fate of our children. It blames us for being poor, and it doesn't give any respect to our families or the perspective or the value that we add. We need a serious reset in terms of village engagement and bringing in our families and respecting our Black mothers and giving them a place at the table. They know their children better than anyone else, and we need to engage them actively in providing education for their children and letting us know what it is that our children need. And we all
You were so close. But we also owe you a minute for your opening response, and we promise to get that back to you in response to your opening question. And I will throw it to Carlos Menchaca. After Carlos Menchaca, it will be Paperboy Prince, Sean Donovan, Quanda Francis, and we'll end on Eric Adams.
Thank you, Natasha. I also commit to ensuring that this is fully funded. This kind of culturally responsive curriculum that the incredible coalition has built is something that needs to happen now. I would even say, how do we do this in the next few months in this budget coming up? That's how urgent this is needed. And I will fight for you as a city council member with the power of my vote in the city council. What is really important about this question is this larger conversation about diversity of our teachers. We need to pay teachers more. I think so much of what we are seeing is the essential workers that have been holding our families have included our parents, bringing universal basic income to families that have been disconnected from stimulus, like our immigrant families, can be held whole with a check so they could pay for rent. But what we also need to do when we think about dual language programs, that has to be ubiquitous. That has to be in every school. As someone who grew up speaking Spanish and English was my second language, so much of what I understand now is the benefit of that. And then the other thing is that I want to talk about this culturally responsive curriculum has to engage every student, including District 75 kids who are either in a District 75 school or part of a community within schools that are siloed. That needs to end. So much of what we can do is actually incorporate a kind of better balance of resources to schools that need it. And in Sunset Park, where I have been organizing, that continues to come up from parents, and everything has to be translated in every language. Language access is the biggest issue that I see right now from parents accessing power. Thank you.
Paperboy Prince.
Paper, yeah. Definitely in my first 100 days, we would help to implement the culturally responsive curriculum. Something that's super important to me is community-based schools that are actually, based around your community, where you're learning about people that came from the area around you. That's so inspirational to students, families. That's one of the reasons so many of our kids are into rap and social media and things like that, because they love hearing about the cool things that people in their community are doing. That'll have them more engaged in schools. I also talk about more futuristic schools. We need people with bold ideas who aren't afraid to flip the whole system on its face and change it for our children, and not just keep it the same old, make a little tweaks to say, hey, I did something, and not actually create change. We need the students to create their own curriculum. These are the bold ideas I'm talking about. Everyone's talking around the issue of how we can actually help our kids. Let's go straight to the kids. They're so smart, so engaged, so powerful. Let's actually empower them and allow them to create their own curriculum. We also need to rethink the architecture of our schools. I talk about this a lot and people laugh when I say cooler buildings, but the architecture where you're actually learning is so important to being culturally responsive in that curriculum. One of the reasons I say this, in our public schools, some of the same contractors that build our prisons, let me slow this down so y'all hear what I'm saying. Some of the same contractors that build our prisons also build our schools. So when the kids get to prison, they feel so much more comfortable. They're being conditioned to prison in the architecture. It's embedded in the architecture. Before we even get to the books, just how the building looks, just how the rooms and the paint so what I'm talking about is really changing that, making it more futuristic, making it more inspiring, letting the kids actually take hold of their own education and do things that are fun to them. Sometimes and learning that failure is so important to success. Some of our biggest people with some of the greatest successes had many failures, and that didn't stop them. So I think allowing our children to fail to help them eventually.
Oh, I'm so glad I'm not the timekeeper this time around. Last three up is Sean Donovan, Quanda Francis, and Eric Adams. And feel free to come off mute and come on in.
You never want to go after Paperboy Prince in one of these, let me tell you, folks. So look, not only would I adopt your plan in the first 100 days, I would actually build on it in a number of different ways. First, we have to make sure that the curriculum we're using, the books, all of the materials are fundamentally different. Your own research showed that while we have a school system that is 85% kids of color, 85% of our books are written by white authors. We have to change that. And so I would immediately convene a panel of the best educators, parents, teachers, and I would pay them to make sure that we are accelerating the development of new curriculum, new materials. I would make sure that we're instituting 450 new bilingual programs across this city. And I would make sure that we're recruiting a much more diverse set of teachers, including bilingual, to our system. And then we have to make sure that we're actually using the incredible resources of New York to inform that. The Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture is an amazing institution we ought to be bringing into these discussions and helping shape our curriculum. Flushing Library, one of the busiest, has an incredible multinational immigrant community that they're also already providing books and others. The Weeksville Community Museum. We have incredible resources. Our people, our institutions in this city, we ought to put them to work in reimagining the curriculum for our schools.
Okay, well, I'll just jump in and say that I would absolutely support it. Again, the elementary school and the middle school that I attended did an amazing job with their curriculum and ensuring that not only were the students seen, that we were heard. If you look at the data from PS 67 and Satellite West, you know, a lot of them are college graduates and have careers. And I think it enabled the students that were from very marginalized communities, Fort Greene projects, Farragut projects, we weren't children that were from privileged backgrounds, but we received a privileged education early on. And it is why I am here today. You have to be the change that you seek. And we do need more modernized buildings. My education plan, Operation Pipeline, does exactly that. Kind of we focus in on the schools that need the resources the most, but from a layered standpoint where we are looking at education, the cultural aspect of it. We need to develop thinkers, not people that memorize things. That's what our education system right now is built on. If you memorize facts, then you're great. My son that is neurally diverse has the executive functioning skills of an adult, but yet he is classified as someone that is not meeting the expectation. Well, what is the expectation? We need to rethink that. We need to rethink education. So the content is great, but how we introduce the content and learning styles is equally important.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much to everyone. We're going to now turn it over to Maurice Blackman for our next question.
Before we do that, Natasha, may I be able to answer?
Did I forget you, Eric?
It's all good.
My bad. I get one mistake per event, so there you go.
It's all good. Well, but first of all, I am just adoring the timekeeper because she keeps us on point, and normally I'm the timekeeper police, so she's doing the job well. First, I want to say we have to stop schooling and start educating. And it's not about the building. The entire city must be the classroom. We need to allow our students to engage in their community, to have real civic engagement, to identify the problems and use their educational experience at solving those problems. And I think it's right when it was mentioned, we have to move away from the rote learning concept. We have to move away from the structure of our school, and we need to allow our students to be fully engaged. The lack of exposure, engagement is destroying the ability and the creativity of our children. Allow them to go on the streets, identify those streets names that are named after slave owners or people with abusive past, and allow them to go through the process of learning how to rename those streets and those buildings. Even the school buildings that they walk through are named of slave owners. We could give them the ability to show how to navigate the process of changing things like that, but also allow them the culturally norm food that they should have. Look into the cafeteria and see some of the food that they're eating and the connectivity to it. Kentucky Fried Chicken was known as a known segregationist, a racist, yet we have it on every corner near our schools. Engaging them in what's happening in their community is powerful. Halal food, understanding why those who are Muslim brothers and sisters consume halal food and what it means, those who have culture meals as well, diversify our student body, reaching out to the historical Black colleges and our other organizations and getting them engaged in a real recruitment and using technology for translation purposes. Yes, diversify staff, but at the same time, let's not hold that back from understanding people.
Thank you so much. And once again, my bad.
All good.
And
All good.
Maurice, we're going to turn it over to Maurice Blackman for our next question.
Thank you. Hello and good evening. I'm Maurice Blackman, an 8-year high school teacher of social studies and literature in New York City public schools. Statistics as recent as 2020 have shown that the average teacher in the United States is a 43-year-old white woman with nearly a decade and a half of teaching experience. New York State data shows that in New York City, about 15% of students are white, but more than 50% of teachers are white. This highlights a lack of representation of Black and BIPOC teachers in one of the most diverse cities in the world. Now, I've personally felt this burden, the burden of being one of the only Black teachers or teachers of color in a school community. We often end up doing the heavy lifting when it comes to equity work and take on a host of other roles and responsibilities for our students and their families. This leaves us feeling burnt out and sometimes isolated from our colleagues because our role in the school communities is so unique and yet so crucial. It's evident that our children need educators who look like them and who share similar cultural backgrounds and experiences. So my question for you is, what do you think is the best way to recruit and retain Black and BIPOC teachers with culturally affirming, healing-centered, and anti-racist practices? And will you commit to doing so if you're mayor of New York City?
We will begin with Catherine Garcia, and the order is in the chat.
I want to thank you for those statistics. I would also say that we usually need more men, particularly in elementary school, so that they are reflective of 50% of the student body. It's clear that we need to continue to make investments in CUNY because they are a great feeder both for all of the economic mobility that they offer, but also as a feeder into our schools. They represent our communities, and we need to be hiring directly from there. But we also need to think about doing fellowship models so that people can get credits towards being able to be a New York City teacher while being in the classroom, so that we are part of those communities. But it's also not just teachers. What do the school nurses look like? What are all the adults representative in that school so that that child's experience is completely holistic? So my plan is to really focus on the CUNY system as a feeder for New York City public school teachers and bring them on board so that we can have a more diverse teaching body. But I also would say we need to focus on bringing more men into the teaching profession, particularly for younger grades. Thank you.
My turn. Thank you. Listen, this question is so central because in addition to all the important things you said, Maurice, we know that particularly students of color do better when they have teachers who look like them and reflect them. I've seen them in my own kids' experience. But let me just say that in addition to what Catherine says, and I agree with what Catherine said, we have to expand the pipeline programs, both through fellowships, but also we have to have partnerships with the kinds of institutions, CUNY, absolutely, and supporting that as a pipeline agency, but it's also our HBCUs. It's also, we've seen it, I've saw it in the Mississippi Delta when I was doing racial justice work on education equity there, where Jackson State was a pipeline of Black teachers to the Mississippi Delta because they created the partnerships that connected from that program directly into the school systems there. We have the opportunity to do that as a world-class city where people want to come, but we also have to do something else, which is to recognize that we have to invest in resourcing it appropriately so that we are a desirable job opportunity and place, because just as you said, it's a burnout job because we place so much requirement on it. So the other thing I would do is make sure it's not just the responsibility of teachers of color, which is having implicit bias training, having accountability for the results and impacts of those teachers along metrics that follow what that training is supposed to deliver, so that it's also an ecosystem where everyone in the system is responsible for the well-being of all our children. So thank you for that question.
Alrighty, I think it's my turn. So I think my colleagues Catherine and Maya have started off with really good responses. One of the things that I've done throughout the course of my career is to actually create training pipelines to address equity issues in both the education field and in the healthcare field. 27 years ago, I created a teacher training program for early childhood programs that now exists in over 14 states across the country. So what we need to do is actually create those pipelines starting at the high school level. We know that a lot of community-based organizations in this city currently employ young people in after-school programs that would be more than happy to pursue a career in education if they are given the right tools, the right resources, the right supports to do so. That means we need to look at not just creating a free CUNY training program that lets young people move seamlessly from public schools into CUNY, but also we need to be looking at things like loan forgiveness. We need to be looking at things like incentive pay. We need to be looking at also what the conditions of our schools are, how we're providing support, what kinds of communities are we creating to support younger teachers as they're learning. As someone who taught in the New York City public school system, I can tell you that I did not have a lot of support. So creating support networks for people to learn together, and using also our community-based organizations as anchor institutions, not just to feed the pipeline for teachers, but also to provide them with that ongoing support. There's, the nonprofit sector, the human service sector is 98% people of color. And that is who we should be looking to feed into our schools. Because yes, we need to also hold our white teachers accountable, but there is nothing like having a Black or brown person standing at the front of the classroom telling you that you matter and telling you that they understand and that they have lived through your experiences. So that's how
Oh, it hurts. It hurts when y'all get me.
Oh, good.
I believe Catherine Garcia is next, but if not, you will correct me.
I actually already went, but I already went. So.
You did? Give me 2 seconds. Because Eric Adams.
I'll go again.
Oh my gosh. Eric Adams, I promise this is not on purpose.
I actually am going to have to jump at exactly 6, but this has been so fabulous to be here. And I really appreciate all the work that your entire organization is doing. I think it is so important that we are supporting our kids and ensuring that they get what they need so they can be successful.
Thank you so much.
They can make money out there.
Thank you. Eric Adams, you're up next. And I promise I won't forget you again.
It's all good. It's all good, Natasha. I just have my stopwatch, okay? I would clearly engage the historical Black colleges. We have some amazing young people that are ready to teach and learn, and also to engage our students. We will have a clear pipeline. I will also build a real pipeline between CUNY and the DOE. When you want to find diversity and those who have lived through real experiences in the inner city, CUNY is the place. As a CUNY grad, going at night, 2 classes at a time, I know the challenges of trying to pay for your education and at the same time raise a family or have a second job. We should engage the Divine Nine, made up of fraternities and sororities, great leaders. Let's get them engaged in recruiting and bringing in teachers. But we also have to do something else. As it was mentioned, we have to be vicarious trauma identifiers. People often overlook the trauma that educators are going through. They're not only teaching 1 and 1 equals 2, they're dealing with the trauma of the children who come in front of them and how do they navigate a system that has often not given them the support that they deserve. I will engage my faith-based institutions to help in recruiting, and we will lift up our educators and let them know how important they are. And then we will put money in their pockets by doing a New York City tax credit for any Black or brown teacher who has spent more than 2 years in the New York City public school system. And then re-engage the Teacher Next Door program, where we allow teachers to find properties through the city, particularly the portfolio of housing and vacant land that we have in this city. We should look to keep our educators here. And lastly, we need to keep Black and brown teachers in the system by giving them the support they need, and I would do that.
Thank you so much. The remaining order is Carlos Menchaca, Paperboy Prince, Sean Donovan, and Quanda Francis.
Hi, everyone. I think a lot about our teachers who have been in the last year holding our children, whether they're in middle school, high school, or UPK. Our teachers have been holding our communities together, our young people together. And so the things that I've heard from them are the following. One, they are seeing the disasters of our disinvestment to our communities, both on just payment for their service as essential workers. We can now think of them now because we've seen it in action. And so I want to pay teachers more. Two, we need to make CUNY free. This is part of this larger conversation that we need to have in the city of New York in placing funds from the NYPD in programs and initiatives like the promise of CUNY in our city. Next, I think that part of what we are all talking about, whether it's curriculum or more resources to our schools, is the fact that our schools are underfunded. That puts a big stress on our teachers. As a city council member, I've been fighting, and we have been doing a good job of actually bringing more resources to teachers for what they need in the classroom. And these are all things that just add up and they burn out and we lose them. And so not only do we have to do a pipeline, we have to pay them. We have to make sure that we make affordable housing that's actually affordable in the city of New York for these public servants. And then make sure that at the end of the day, they have all the language access needs so that they can engage parents. So much of what I hear from teachers is that they can't even talk to parents, and the things that are available right now are not there. These are all things that we can do to support. And then also teaching to the test. We have to we have to remove the tests from our everyday experiences. And we can do that. COVID has given us that opportunity in this emergency to make it happen. Thank you.
Paper, yeah. I just want to spread love to all the candidates here. You all are so amazing. I love you all so much. And everyone here, I wanted to wait to the end, but I want to do it here because you're so special. Truly amazing and inspiring. I love you all so much. Definitely to echo what some others have said, yes to the HBCUs. My parents been married 31 years and actually met at Howard University on campus there. And I've seen from the strong HBCU network what that can do to actually empower communities, empower students. And I think we could even take it a step further and bring HBCUs to New York City, finding a way, even if it starts as an online university or something like that, finding a way to bring that HBCU campus and atmosphere to New York City, making it a CUNY, finding out how to do that. I think we also need folks that are in power running the schools that Black teachers are inspired to work for, and that they feel like they're heard by, and they feel like that their ideas that there's a good feedback loop there. I think that's very important. We also need to find a way to make teaching cool. You know, again, if you see it with the NYPD, I mean, a lot of their ads, right? They have cool, now you see some of the NYPD ads, they got guys like jeans, t-shirt, a chain, and like, hey, you want to join the NYPD? It's like going to the club. You know, they make it cool. We need to find ways to make teaching cool. And even having, you know, teaching influencers, people that are actual in our communities and that can help influence others to want to be teachers. Last thing I'll say is we need to provide free rent, free food, and cars and transportation for these Black teachers so they can actually get to work and be fully energized when they're there. Paper, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Sean Donovan and then Quanda Francis.
Thanks, Natasha, and thank you, Maurice. Look, let's just say it clearly. In a school system that's 85% kids of color, we must change when less than half of our teachers and our school leaders are of color. And this is particularly powerful at a younger age. All the research shows that by 3rd grade, if you have a teacher that looks like you, your chance of graduating high school is dramatically higher. So I made a very specific commitment in my education plan to dramatically increase both teachers and school leaders of color. But as Maurice, you said, this isn't just about recruiting and bringing them in, it's also about retention. So I would start even before CUNY. I totally agree, CUNY, our historically Black colleges are a huge opportunity, but we should also be looking at high school to create early exposure programs, scaffolded pathways to teaching in our schools. We also ought to be building programs to allow other educators to become classroom teachers. And those are incredibly important. New York City Men Teach, there are many other examples of those. And then we have to retain better. We have to ensure that we're creating pathways to school leadership for educators of color, because leaders are more likely to hire teachers of color. We should be partnering with community leaders to do anti-bias training, a whole range of other things. And I'd create a new educator fellowship that would help as well. One of my other innovative ideas is to create an education recovery corps to put young people to work right now in our schools, not only help with academic advancement when we've had so much damage from COVID, but emotional as well. The last thing I would say is all of this won't matter if we don't hold our system accountable. So I would build on the work that Carlos and other leaders in the city council have done. I would make data available on teacher diversity.
So sorry. Oh, it hurts me. Kwanda, you're up next.
Yeah, so I'm going to jump right in and I'm going to say, let's borrow some things from the business community. I'm a part of the KPMG PhD project, which is a push to diversify the business profession by training students of African Americans, Latinos, Native Americans to earn PhDs and push them into the business professions. And they've had tremendous success. PhD students are not paying for, they're not paying for tuition. There is a pipeline of networks. And if we can replicate that in education, start identifying, and let's be clear, I am all for individuals in the classroom that look like me, but they also have to understand my plight. And two of my favorite teachers, one was an African American and one was Jewish, and they were amazing. They understood my plight. They allowed me to be visible, and that's what you need. I don't want to focus on ensuring that our educators look like us, but they do need to understand us. It's just because you look like me doesn't mean that you understand my plight. And I have also, in navigating through these spaces, I've personally have witnessed that. So.
Thank you so much. Two quick things. One, I meant to mention this at the jump that Maya Wiley and Catherine Garcia needed to leave by 6. And I should have said that earlier. My apologies. And we wish them well. In case, bye. And we want to give Diane Morales her 1 minute to answer the opening question that was posed by our co-moderator, Lucia Diaz, which was, what is your personal connection to culturally responsive education, either as a student, a parent, or otherwise? And you have 1 minute.
I'm sorry, I'm having some serious tech issues over here. So I thank you. I'm kind of like, all right, my apologies. All right, I can do this. So, I want to say a couple things. One is that I'm the only educator in this race. I went to school in New York City all the way through high school, and then I went to college, and I came back to graduate school here in Columbia, but it really wasn't until I started a program at Harvard that I stumbled across the first educator, Doctora Aileen de los Reyes, who actually helped me understand what it means to be educated in a culturally responsive way. Aileen was the first educator who invited me to bring my whole self into the education process, who saw me and acknowledged that my identity and my experiences were not only a critical part of who I am, but of how I make meaning in the world. We taught together, we actually taught at the doctoral level, we taught a class called Education for Social and Political Change. And the core of that class was that the way that we educate our students can either be used as a means to help them recognize, identify, and
the 1 minute goes by so fast. By the end, you're going to get this time in. So I'm going to turn it over to Keith Fuller, a young person from the Urban Youth Collaborative, to ask our next question. I believe in you.
Good afternoon. I'm a member of Make the Road New York's Youth Power Project, as well as the Urban Youth Collaborative. And with YPP and UYC, a lot of the work we do is centered around significantly improving the lives of the youth. Our goal is to ultimately dismantle the school to prison pipeline, and we know that can be achieved by meeting the educational, physical, and emotional needs of our students and promoting a culturally responsive environment. That is impossible when students are policed and criminalized in school. There is a current proposal to take the NYPD School Safety Division and place them under the Department of Education, and this does not align with our vision for truly police-free schools, and instead maintains policing under a different name. Would you commit to fully disbanding the NYPD School Safety Division and metal detectors and reinvesting those resources into hiring more social workers, guidance counselors, restorative justice coordinators, and focusing investments in schools where Black students have faced criminalization?
Diane Morales, you are up first. Diane? Did we lose Diane?
She was having tech issues.
Oh, okay. So we'll throw it to Paperboy Prince and we'll revisit Diane when she's back on.
Paper, yeah. Thank you so much for that question, Keith. Amazing job. And a lot of people are talking about this, you know, going to school and seeing a cop right in front of your school, you know, mean mugging you, doesn't really inspire you to learn a lot of times. Even in our voting centers, going to vote and seeing cops in your polling place sometimes, you know, influences who even wants to vote. And that's why I'm the only candidate in this race that's an abolitionist, right? That's actually fighting to abolish the police. Again, when slavery was happening in America, no one said, well, a lot of people did say, actually, let's defund slavery. Let's make it less slavery. And we can have some slaves in the North and we can have some in the South. But there were ultimately people that were abolitionists who said, you know what? That's not gonna work. It's still gonna creep in and it's still gonna, that energy is still gonna help take over the city. So that's why I'm advocating to abolish the police and replace them with a love force that does a lot of the things that you talked about in your question. So if a student feels like they're having issues at home or they don't have money for lunch, instead of using that as an opportunity to incarcerate them, we take that as an opportunity to love them, give them a chance that, hey, you need money for lunch, here's $20 for lunch and you can save the rest for tomorrow. Oh, you need extra clothes, you're fighting because people are making fun of the clothes you're wearing to school. Here, come with us to our love team shopping day. We're gonna get you some new clothes, new shoes, so you feel confident going into your school day. So yes, 100%, I'm an abolitionist. Let's abolish the police, rethink that completely, and implement a love team that puts love first for our community.
Thank you. Quanda Francis.
What I will say is that I agree with a lot of what Paperboy Prince just said in terms of the anxiety that can come along with the uniform. But I would like for us to rethink how we see the school safety officer and think of them as like a resource to the school. I am in favor of removing, school safety officers or resource officers as I look at them, because I have a very different experience with them in terms of, at my son's school, when I'm running late, that school safety officers was the one that would bring his lunch up to him. But we want to ensure that we not forget about the children that are going to school that have issues with safety. And it is important to ensure that if they want to get a quality education, that they feel safe in their environment. And I would look at the data, and for the schools that don't need school safety officers or metal detectors or any of that, I'm in favor of removing them. And I'm also in favor of rethinking, how we utilize professionals, because a lot of school safety officers are from the communities. And they are oftentimes, that individual that a student will go to when there's an issue at home or when there's an issue that can't readily be resolved. A lot of them are very positive role models because a lot of them are from the communities. I've spoken to a number of school safety officers, and they care about the students. So I think that, again, I understand the anxiety that comes along with that. And I also understand that as professionals, the professionals that they are, that we should utilize them appropriately.
Diane Morales, are you back?
So I can't work my camera, but can you hear me?
We can hear you.
It's real. I'm keeping it real. I'm sorry, what was the question?
Yes. You know what? I will drop it back into the chat. Oh, you may not be able to see it. So very quickly,
yes.
It is our goal is to dismantle the school to prison pipeline. And we know that we know that can be achieved by meeting the educational, physical, and emotional needs of our students and promoting a culturally responsive environment. That is impossible when students are policed and criminalized in school. There is a current proposal to take the NYPD School Safety Division and place them under the Department of Education. This does not align to our vision for truly police-free schools and instead maintains policing under a different name. Would you commit to fully disbanding the NYPD School Safety Division and metal detectors and reinvesting those resources into hiring more social workers, guidance counselors, restorative justice coordinators, and focusing investments in schools where Black students have faced criminalization?
Yes, this is an easy one for me, and I'm going to do it in less than 60 seconds because I was the first candidate to call for defunding of the police, and I was the first candidate to call for doing so to the tune of $3 billion. And I was the first to say that we need to disband the school to prison pipeline by removing police from our schools and reinvesting all of those dollars into mental health services, into additional academic and educational supports, into recreational supports and arts programming, and into everything that we know that our children need in order to actually be able to learn and to thrive and to feel heard, seen, and valued in our schools. So absolutely.
Thank you. Sean Donovan.
Thanks, Natasha. Thank you, Keith. So yes, I am absolutely committed to this. It is a big part of my education plan. And it not only is about getting police out of our schools, my proposal is to replace them with what I call positivity, prevention, relationships, and response coordinators, and to add 150 more social workers, in addition to the Education Recovery Corps that I talked about earlier, of young people who reflect our communities, who can help both academically and emotionally with the trauma of COVID. But we need to go farther than that. We should remove metal detectors, on-campus arrests, and handcuffing. We should make sure that we're changing the practices, disciplinary practices that disproportionately impact students of color, and give robust training on alternatives. All of that needs to happen, but we have to go beyond that as well. It's not just in our schools. We have to end the school to prison pipeline. when I was President Obama's budget director, we had the military giving military equipment to our police departments. I stopped that, and I would change the culture of policing. We also have to look to corrections. Right now, we spend over $400,000 per prisoner per year in our corrections department. We need to redirect that funding to break the cycle of incarceration. And when I was housing commissioner, I started giving housing vouchers to people getting out of Rikers. It had a dramatic impact. Imagine if we followed my plan and invested $3 billion a year in those community-based programs. We could fundamentally end the school to prison pipeline and end the cycle of incarceration.
Thank you, Eric Adams.
Thank you. Make sure I'm unmuted. Thank you so much. And this is an important issue for me. As you know, I was a former police officer, and public safety is a prerequisite to prosperity. And students have come to me throughout the years to sit down and talk about how do we create a safe environment. And although the numbers have decreased over the years, we still have pockets of real crimes in our schools. Everything from sex trafficking to robberies to rapes, felonious assaults with weapons. And so with those real incidents, it is important to me, for my teachers and my students, that they're in a place where they are safe. We cannot put children in an environment where people will prey on them, particularly around sex trafficking, where people prey at schools on our girls that attend our schools. So I support funding all of those initiatives that were just mentioned. I believe we can run a more streamlined police department, particularly around overtime. We could take that money and put in some real initiatives. We could decrease the number of school safety officers that are present. We can change their uniform to be more conducive to a school environment. And we should do more proactive ways to prevent some of the violence that is spilling over into our schools. And also support social workers and wraparound services. Children are traumatized by the time they enter a classroom. And I believe we need to expand how we provide those basic services. Like my partnership over at Boys and Girls High School, where I teamed up with them to have food pantries, allow them to have washing machines to help children with some of the basic needs that they are experiencing. But it is important to me that our schools are safe for our children, and you don't have to do it in a heavy-handed way.
Thank you. This morning, I stood up with our young people who were in opposition to Intro 2211. The bill that is mentioned in this question is a bill that was built without students at the table, that is essentially just moving police officers to the Department of Education, which I do not support. I support removing all police officers. And I understand that there are some people who have good and positive relationships with some of the safety officers. But what we're talking about is a systemic issue that has brought a very white supremacy oriented safety plan in our schools, and it doesn't work. It doesn't allow for safety to actually grow. And I think you've heard a lot of the candidates talk about this, but I do support more social workers that are trained, culturally sensitive social workers and mental health professionals and restorative justice. These are things that are already growing in our schools today that work. We got to fund that more. How do we do that? By defunding the NYPD. I'm a council member and I got to vote no on the budget last year. I'm the one that stood up and said no to my colleagues who didn't actually defund the NYPD. Our studies show that the budget is actually probably larger than what we already know. So $3 billion is exactly what we at a minimum need to do. And we can do that by removing that fat and bringing that back to our schools to fund the things that we're talking about now. And then finally, I think what I want to ensure is that police-free schools, counselors not cops, become actual policies that we can actually implement in the city of New York. And that can happen in the next few months. And I will remind you that we will continue to move as a movement in the next few months, not just on this political, but in the city council. And I can't wait to continue to fight with you.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to our co-moderator, Lucia Diaz.
gracias a la educación culturalmente receptiva y sostenida y con el compromiso de padres, vamos a escuchar a nuestra compañera Grisel del Comité de Padres en Acción.
Hi, everyone. My name is Grisel Cardona. I am a single mom of 3. One of my boys is in District 75, and my 3-year-old, he had did the turning 3 process, and so that's where we at. So my question, I have it on my phone. Give me 1 second. Okay, so there's a lot of talk about how to strengthen community education councils and parent associations, and that it's important. But 95% of parents are not on any parent body or will never be. We want to know how you plan to strengthen the role of every parent in the life of school. What role, voice, and power do you see those parents having in their schools and districts beyond the elected parent bodies? And we'll go with the list that who had the list.
We'll start with Carlos Menchaca.
Thank you. As a council member, I have been working with CECs. We removed the screens in 15, and the CECs really brought a lot of leadership to this conversation. And I think what I saw in this really great opportunity was a lack of Sunset Park parents for a lot of reasons. And one of them is because they have 3 jobs. Why not pay CEC members to be able to be a public servant, but being able to compensate them for their time and compensate them for being part of designing and reimagining. So I feel like that's one of the things that I hear more and more from parents. 2 is language access. And I keep saying this. This is one of the biggest barriers for members of non-English communities to engage. If they're not going to be heard, why do they even want to show up? And that can be a game changer to ensure that everyone has a very respectful engagement in spaces. And then 3rd, I think what's really important about the CECs is giving them more power to actually have impact in schools, working with principals, working with parents, working with children to be able to figure out how to impact. Because what we do know from COVID is that one school in one school district is going to be different from another and have different needs. And so how does a CEC offer that leadership with resources and power? Thank you.
Thank you. We now have Sean Donovan, who will be followed by Paperboy Prince, Wanda Francis, and Eric Adams.
Thank you. And look, one of the many things we've learned, the painful lessons of this past year, is that no matter how hard our educators work, too many families, particularly families of color, just don't trust our schools to keep our kids safe. And so we can't support our educational recovery until we actually build that trust. And that's why one of the very first things I would do with my chancellor is go out to communities across this city, sit with families and students and hear those concerns and begin rebuilding that trust. I would also create formal systems to make sure that we're getting more family and student input into our schools and our districts. And while we're not going to solve this just with our community education councils, we do have to dramatically increase the outreach, the accessibility through language and other barriers right now that are stopping greater participation. And I would actually, as we make them more diverse, give them real power in decision-making. I would create a participatory budgeting system where the CECs and parent councils could actually make decisions, because money is power. We need to add that power to what CECs are able to do. I would also say that there's much more we can do just to engage parents better, expand language access, hold school leadership meetings at different times, offer daycare at those meetings. And we can learn from Children's Aid that we can recruit volunteers and parents to committees, offer tuition assistance, guidance, even pay, as Carlos suggested. There are many, many ways that we can do a much better job really engaging parents and giving them power in our system.
Great, thank you so much. I'm just checking our order. So Diane Morales is back. She's been having tech issues, but it snowed and that's what's happening. And so it's going to be Diane Morales and then followed by Paperboy Prince.
And this is the question about the engagement, right? The structures for parental engagement and community engagement. Amazing. Okay, so a couple things. One I'll say is that the structures that currently exist are not actually set up to provide easy access and engagement for our parents and communities. A lot of folks can't attend these meetings. It's just not set up for us. So the first thing we have to do is actually create flexibility in those structures so that it does allow for parents to engage and participate, even if they can't make meetings, in other different ways. The other thing is, I think we need to think about how we have parents and students engaged at decision-making at the Department of Education. What does that look like? What structures do we need to actually put in place so that parents are part of the decision-making, not just in these sort of symbolic committees and structures, but actually at the top where the most critical decisions are being made. The other sort of thing I'll say is that on the local level, at the school level, which is where our kids are attending on a daily basis, we also need to create flexible structures for parents to have input that is not also just symbolic or cursory, but input that is functionally part of the decision-making process. And that means providing education and information to our parents and families that enables them to understand the levers that they have, the control that they have, and where it is that they can actually engage to impact meaningful decision. And we need to do that in linguistically appropriate ways and culturally relevant ways. And we need to do that in a way that also provides, someone has mentioned this before, some level of compensation to the families and the individuals that are providing that support as well. And that we are compensating our parents for their time, because we need to acknowledge who they are and what their circumstances are and contribute to them being able to effectively participate. Yes, I did it.
Paper, yeah. Parents are so important, and it takes a village to truly raise a child, and we need to make our schools, our communities, more community-based. That's why one of my core principles of my campaign is spreading love via love centers. Having a place where the community can exist and we can get to know our neighbors, that we can get to know our friends, that we can get to know more people. Hey, did your kid do the homework? Did you hear about? There's so much disconnect in our communities. People aren't, they don't feel like they're a part of the community. We just feel like individuals in a city. So making our communities actual communities, these events, making them more social. When we have these teacher events, a lot of times the reasons the parents don't want to go is because they're boring. Yeah, they're invested in their children's success, but it's boring. And I finally have some time off. I got, somebody to watch the kids. I don't want to go to this. So making them more like parties, making them more of a social event where you can get to know other parents, you can make friends, having free food there, you can chat about what's going on. Some of the kind of non-important stuff helps us get to the important stuff. I think universal basic income is super important, and having that allows parents to have less jobs and less of this pressure on making ends meet every month. Also, I mentioned paying kids to go to school, paying our Black and brown youth to go to school. That helps the parents be more invested in their education in a real way, because they're like, hey, this is an extra paycheck that's coming in. You need to be getting good grades. You need to be showing up at school and what's happening down there. And then, yes, definitely echoing language access. And to repeat what I said before, letting our children choose the curriculum, and their parents would obviously be a part of that process too. So thank you.
I'm going to jump in there and say I agree with everything that you said. And well, I will add that we need to understand the information seeking channels of parents. And We need to understand how parents are getting information about meetings that affect their participation. I've spoke to a number of parents that say, hey, I didn't find out about a PTA meeting until the date had already passed. So if we are still using archaic ways to communicate with parents, they're not getting the information that they need in the time period that they need it to make decisions. The same situation with the COVID-19 pandemic. People are not getting the information that they need when they need it. It's one of the reasons why I kind of pivoted from, pursuing a PhD in accounting to a PhD in information studies, because I'm like, wow, information impacts our decisions in ways that, that I don't believe that society is paying attention to. And when you talk about a systemic practice, whether we're talking about policing in schools or whether we're talking about how to best engage parents, it starts with, right, understanding their needs, utilizing surveys, right? I want to know as mayor if a parent is in a shelter system, and I want to know this. I want to know if they have access to the internet. Why? Because I'm not going to send an email because they may not get it. I'm not going to send mail because it may not get to them in time in order for them to participate in this function. So it starts with how we utilize information in order to, as a facilitator for engagement. We have to understand the parents and the students that we service. And again, 4 parts of that: administrators, teachers, parents, and students, right? We have to look at that collectively as a vehicle, and the wheels need to go in the same direction, not in different directions. That's not working. That's not efficiency. We need to rethink this whole situation, of engagement.
I believe I'm next. Thank you. Thank you so much. First of all, parents and parent relationships are not a burden. They are a strength. And I really believe we need to also redefine the relationship between how we treat Black and brown men in the educational system. Education is not mother only, it's dad too. And we need to start having a welcoming mat for dads. And I think it's really unfair the way the Department of Education looks at dads, and basically they're not inviting to them. We know it's a problem with parents overall, but that's a focus that I really want to look at. If you look at an organization in the Bronx like Real Dad Network in the Bronx, they are very much engaged in the education of their children. And that is something that we should scale up and empower dads who have dad-daughter days, dad-son days, come inside the school and engage in real activities. And then let's duplicate some of the other success. Some great programs in the Bronx. They build collaboration with school staff by leading yearly neighborhood tours to teach about historical community sites, local leaders, local organizations and groups. It's amazing. At Highbridge, a green school in the Bronx, parents and teachers co-wrote a culturally responsive unit in which Latinx students need testimonies or read testimony of immigrant experiences. And so that engagement can't be just on open school night. And then let's schedule these meetings when the parents are available, not when the teachers are available. That means weekends. When you look at what Bedford Academy, Eagle Academy, standing room only in their parent teachers engagements. So it's about meeting people where they are, not where we are. Let's meet them where they are.
Thank you so much.
Bueno, continuamos con la educación culturalmente receptiva y sostenida y la financiación de fondos propios. También escucharemos a nuestra compañera Rashida de la organización La Alianza por una Educación de Calidad. Gracias.
Gracias, Lucia. Peace, everyone. My name is Rashida Harris. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I live in the Bronx, and my daughter attends public school, 5th grade, in East Harlem, El Barrio. I am a parent leader with PAC and CEJ, and I am an equity and education advocate with the Bronx Healing Center Schools Working Group and a proud ed warrior with AQE, the Alliance for Quality Education. So, all of you have made some commitments to culturally responsive education, and we believe you care about this issue. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here today, right? Okay. But for years, communities of color have experienced elected officials saying they believe in something, but not putting the necessary funding into the budget. So my question, would you, as New York City mayor, invest at least $250 million in your first term to make culturally responsive curriculum a reality? And if so, how? And if not, why?
Eric Adams, we will start with you.
Thank you so much. And I believe that it's imperative to invest in a real way in culturally education. I don't know if 250 is enough. I don't know if 500 is enough. And so I don't want to attach a dollar amount to accomplishing the task. And I think of much of what we can do is not just about dollars and cents. It's really being clear, being directive to tell your school system what you want. And there's so many things we can do that we're not doing every day to improving culturally relevant education. And if that's the dollar amount we need to buy more books that's reflective of the students, if that's the dollar amount we need to bring in professionals to do real instructions on how to interact with teachers and training to carry out this task, I'm more than willing to do so. But to merely put a dollar amount in the educational system that has failed to properly use its almost $30 billion budget is not solving the problem. It's about the commitment and dedication of having a culturally relevant education. And that's what I'm going to bring as the mayor, and my chancellor is going to understand that, and they're going to ensure that they implement my wishes of doing so.
I think I am next, so I'll jump right in and say I like to agree with Eric. I believe we should invest and look at the numbers. As an accountant, I believe we should look at the numbers and determine the accurate cost factor for ensuring that we have a culture, for ensuring that we have the sort of curriculum that we need. Again, my approach as a scientist is I have a process. So I will consider everything in terms of making that decision. And if it's 250 million or if it's more, I agree as someone that is a beneficiary of a culturally responsive curriculum that it is important and we need to ensure that it's implemented. And my education plan, operation pipeline outlines that. And so I would like for you to look at that on my website.
Thank you. We'll be followed by Paperboy Prince, and feel free to drop y'all links in the chat too. Don't be shy, y'all.
Paper, yeah, definitely. Great question, Rashida. I love your energy, the vibes. You know the vibes. I already see what's going on. And to that, to specifically address your part about the money, right? Because that's kind of what gets my blood boiling a little bit, because we spend so much money in this city on so many things meant to help the people, right? And what ends up happening is this money goes to white nonprofits, and the salaries of these people, it goes to these different contractors, and it never trickles down to actually get to the kids and the families and the people who need it most. So a politician can come on here and say they're going to spend 250, they're going to spend 500, they're going to spend $1 billion, $2 billion. But what that means is they're going to get that money to their nonprofit buddies. They're going to get that money to their contractor buddies. And the last people that are going to get it are the children and families in the Bronx, in Brooklyn, in Staten Island, in Queens. When I'm mayor, that is not going to be an issue. For me, I have no reason not to make sure that y'all get the money first. We're ready to flip this whole system on its head and show you what can happen when we have real people of the people that are in power. And, you know, one of the biggest problems with this, while we've seen it, is that the people that are supposed to oversee this aren't putting the hammer down on them. The people get away time and time again. They're not prosecuted. The journalists, so many of our small media organizations have closed down, so they're not even following up on it. As people get away with it time after time, and they're getting rich while they're keeping our communities poor forever. So I feel like bigger than even talking about the money is how we're going to make sure that money gets to the people and it's not going to all these different places that don't help us.
Rashida, culturally responsive curriculum. That's what you're asking for. That's what this whole coalition has been asking for. And you need curriculum, good culturally responsive curriculum to make schools work. If we can't have this, we're not going to have like education that our young people and our neighborhoods need. And so 250 million, we should be able to do that. How? One is right now the Department of Education has a lot of contracts that, if we look at it, are going to consultants. I think that there's an ability to look at that. I think we should look at that now for this next budget. This is why I want you to think about this next mayoral run, but also think about what we can do today and really make sure that we can potentially do that now in this year. Culturally responsive curriculum means that kids can be engaged in a whole new way, and that teachers and parents can start seeing themselves in this curriculum. I've been fighting with you on the front lines in spaces, and I hope that you have seen that kind of commitment in my day job as council member when we bring resources to schools through the budget. And so, absolutely, 250 million. Let's start there, and if we need more, let's get to it. Thank you.
We'll have Sean Donovan, followed by Diane Morales.
Thanks, Natasha, and thanks, Rashida. Let me be crystal clear. The answer is yes, Rashida. And I'm not talking the talk here. I've actually walked the walk on this. I'm not a politician. I'm a public servant, and I have been throughout my career. President Obama asked me to lead the $4 trillion federal budget when we were facing the biggest budget deficit since World War II. We brought that deficit down, and we still invested in expanding healthcare, expanding education, solving homelessness. We absolutely can do this and find at least $250 million. So I want to say very specifically 2 places that we would get that. One is in our criminal justice system. As I said before, it's not just in policing. We spend over $400,000 per year per prisoner in our criminal justice system. That has to end. We also spend $3 billion a year in our shelters and hotels right now. We can end homelessness. We can reimagine our right to shelter as a right to housing, save lives, and save money. I did that when I was housing secretary. I led the strategy that dramatically reduced homelessness across this country. And we not only ended veteran homelessness in more than 80 cities and states, we saved money doing it and reinvested it into things that matter. That is what I would do as mayor. And very specifically, I've made a commitment to create $500 million per year in community-based programs my first 2 years, and $3 billion by the end of my first term, just out of the criminal justice budget in this city. And we can save significantly more on homelessness that we could reinvest in culturally sensitive and directed education programs.
Thank you so much. And I think we have one more.
So yes, Rashida, absolutely, right? When we talk about culturally responsive schools, essentially, in my mind, that's one of the ways in which we are reclaiming what it means to be safe and healthy and able to thrive for our children in schools. And so absolutely, when I talk about defunding the police and removing police from our schools, I'm talking about a savings of over $400 million for the Department of Education, because that's currently what is being spent for safety for our young people. So when I talk about removing that and reinvesting that, I'm talking about not just investing in mental health services for our young people, but I am also talking about investing in the materials and the curriculum that we need, investing in the teacher training that we need and the support that we need, and fundamentally overhauling how it is our children experience education in the New York City Department of Education, and investing in what it is that we know helps our children grow and learn and feel safe and valued. The other thing is, I stated this, I don't know if it was last week or the week before, at the mayoral forum on the Albany agenda. I'm coming for Albany. I'm coming for the money that they owe us. I am unapologetic and unabashed about the need for us to stand up to the man that is the bully in Albany and has been withholding our funds from our children and our schools. And I am coming for it because I'm not afraid to do that. Right? So we're going to get our children funded. We're going to get our schools funded. We're going to get what we need for our students. And we're going to fundamentally transform what the school environment looks like, feels like, and provides for our children. That's what I'm going to do.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So we have a few minutes remaining, and we're going to do about 3 questions in our lightning round portion. So how this will work is, these are yes, no questions. They will not have long explanations. They will be yes, no, and then you yes, and then you come on, and then the next person will go. I will drop the order in the chat, and we are going to begin. And just so you know, folks didn't know this as we were doing it, but as you were dropping your questions in the chat or in the Q&A, we did transform some of those into the yes, no questions that we're about to ask now. So thank you to the audience for your contributions. And sorry that we could not get some more. Okay, I'm ready. I hope y'all ready. Take some deep breaths, y'all. It's about yes, no. Yes, no. Okay, first question. Will you ensure that District 75, where many of our students with disabilities are concentrated, is included in culturally responsive curriculum, teacher trainings, and other culturally responsive initiatives? And so we're going to go with this order right here in the chat. We're going to start with Catherine Garcia, who is not here because I dropped the wrong one. But we'll go with Zion Morales, and whoever else is here, go.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yes.
Paper, yeah.
Yes.
Good job, y'all. I think we got everybody. If we didn't, then y'all snuck out. I'm going to turn it to Lucia for our next question.
Gracias, Natasha. La segunda pregunta es, las escuelas comunitarias son un modelo de cómo las escuelas pueden construir alianzas sólidas y equitativas en las comunidades y en las familias. Y fue una campaña del CEJ la que condujo a la iniciativa actual de las escuelas comunitarias del señor alcalde de Blasio. Como alcalde, se comprometerá a ampliar las escuelas comunitarias de la ciudad de Nueva York para lograr una recuperación equitativa de los estudiantes de la ciudad de Nueva York?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Sí, absolutamente.
Yes.
Sí, claro.
It moved from the chat too fast for me. If you could just tell me that question if I was able to read it.
Would you expand community schools?
Yes, 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 did it in Brooklyn.
Ok, Gracias por sus respuestas. Vamos para la tercera pregunta. ¿Se comprometería a exigir clases de estudios étnicos desde preescolar hasta el grado 12? Esta es una de las 4 demandas nacionales de las escuelas, una de las 4 propuestas que hay de las vidas negras importan. ¿Sí o no?
Absolutely. Once again, yes.
Yes. Sí.
Sí.
Of course.
Sí.
Yes.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Le paso la palabra a nuestra compañera Natasha.
So thank you so much. We have come almost to the end of our program, but we're going to close out with an amazing young person who is going to share a poem. Is Nathaniel Swanson from the Urban Word, and he's a youth poet.
Can people see me? Am I good? All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Nathaniel Swanson. I'm currently a 19-year-old spoken word artist, originally from East New York, Brooklyn, all day, born and raised. I am an alum of New York City Public Schools through grades K through 12. I went to school in Brooklyn my entire life, so I'm kind of ingrained deeply in everything. I've actually been at a forum with mayoral candidates this week with Borough President Eric Adams. So it's good to see your face again, and as well as the rest of the candidates. I was very happy to see what you all are running on, the things that interest you, the things that you are going to be invested in if elected as mayor. So it was a really great opportunity to hear from you all. And I'll be reciting a poem that I wrote during my time in high school when I was experiencing things with teachers in a particular subject. So all of that will become clear. And as stated, I am a youth poet associated with Urban Word NYC, which is a non-for-profit in New York dedicated to promoting youth literacy and promoting the arts. I am so grateful for Urban Word NYC. They're the reason I'm in college right now. They're the reason why other folks that I know are in college right now. So they're definitely doing all the great work that was discussed during this panel. You should definitely check them out. First step to solving a troublesome equation is isolating the variable, an element, feature, or factor that is liable to vary. The one thing you cannot account for in your lesson plans. Let's call it X. By standard practice, X in all like terms must be rearranged before a solution is reached. Meaning, if a student is disruptive or seems frustrated, remove them from the safety of their peers, and anyone like them must go too. When stripping the problem down to a sole student, make sure what you do on one side, you do to the other, to keep balance. If you forget this, a solution may never be reached. If one is, it is often incorrect. Meaning, Black students being reprimanded more than white ones for the same behavior was never the correct solution. After isolating the student, strip them of any armor, remember to follow PEMDAS, placate education and the murder and destruction of Black children and make it a spectacle. Some variables are so hard to whittle down, they need a radical to do it. Old school teachers experienced in dismantling Black minds destroy their power to get to the roots. The product being how many times they can be told they aren't good enough until they believe it. If the variable thinks they are on top, denominate them useless, stupid, get canceled like cross multiplication when their attitudes multiply, divide by the coefficient. Take and take until there is no more left to distribute, round the remainders down. Make a path from school to prison with a straight edge, gossip names into cells instead of lecture halls because they forgot to raise their hands, because they talk back to an authority figure, use a protractor to find the degree of murder they will be charged with, charge interest on prison time, make sure they understand how long they'll be a slave again, exponentially, defining a growth whose rate becomes more rapid in proportion to the growing size like mass incarceration. Don't tell them they're 3.8 times as likely to receive out-of-school suspensions, but that discipline is recursive. Teach them statistics on them being the most poor, criminally active, uneducated demographic without explaining scientific bias. Data never lies.
Of course, when it does, tada, there goes another theorem to teach them STEM has no place for blooming students of color because they weren't even supposed to germinate. Turn in your blackboard for a whiteboard because there's a metaphor in there on value, except I'm too stupid to find it. Or lazy, whatever your ugly chicken scratch says, this time math class cannot end quick enough. And the bell does not dismiss me, of course. You do. In classroom conversation, on my report card, in the eval I had after school one time, I was the problem. You solved me. Next question. Thank you.
Oh.
Amazing. Amazing. Powerful.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Thank you
need
for
us
your
all
voice.
to be like, "Ow, let's
Yeah.
do it. Let's
Yes.
Gracias, Nathaniel. Asimismo, pueden ustedes, todos los asistentes a este foro, estar conectados con nosotros. Síganos en las redes sociales. Ahí en el chat vamos a colocar el enlace de todas las redes sociales en Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. También pueden unirse a nosotros en la Escuela Liberación. Repito, en el chat están los enlaces y pueden unirse a nuestra línea de correo electrónico para estar al día en todas las noticias a nivel de educación. Le concedo la palabra a nuestra compañera Natacha. Gracias a todos los candidatos por participar esta noche. Muchísimas gracias. Que Dios los bendiga.
Muchas gracias.
Buenas noches.
For having us.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Oh, wait. I haven't closed us out yet. Can I close us?
Okay, I'm sorry.
Don't rush it, Carlos. Come on.
Tasha, all yours.
To close us out, one, I want to say thank you to everyone who joined us today. Thank you to everyone who is on this call. Thank you to everyone, to the hundreds of people who joined us on Facebook Live and who has shared this. Thank you to those of you who are watching not live, who are watching this as a recording. Thank you to all of the candidates for coming, for bearing your hearts, and for being as open and honest as you could. Thank you to the amazing team, because it takes a whole team to make this happen behind the scenes. Thank you, and we love you all. Thank you to all of the CEJ leaders, to our Urban Youth Collaborative, to Urban Word, and to Maurice Blackman for joining us. Lastly, and I'm gonna cry, so it's just happening. 4 years ago, in the shadow of Trump's election, CEJ launched our culturally responsive education campaign. At the time, we couldn't get reporters to cover the issue or any of our events. At the time, very, very few elected officials would stand with us or talk about this issue, let alone have deep knowledge about it. At the time, we could barely get a meeting with the Department of Education to talk about it. Oh. But what a difference Black and Brown parent organizing makes. Because CEJ parents are not new to this. We are not new to this. We are true to this. When no one else would stand with us, we stood with ourselves. When you wouldn't meet with us, we kept banging down doors. And now CRE is on the lips and the tongues of every elected official, of everyone within the Department of Education, at the city, the state, and the federal level. And you have shown as an audience that this is a top issue when we will be casting our votes for mayor in a few short months. Oh, what a difference Black and Brown parents organizing makes. Because of you and because of this work, we have been able to push the envelope, and we will continue to do so. This is not the last time we will talk about this issue. This is merely the last time we will speak about it today. So we look forward to not only continue to organize with all those who are watching. We look forward to see how this race shakes out. We look forward to seeing who becomes mayor. And we look forward to working with you or continuing to organize on the outside. So thank you so much. Thank you to you all. I wish you well. I wish you safety. I wish you warmth in this snowstorm. And most of all, I wish you love. Good night.
Good night. Thanks, Natasha.
Night,
Buenas
Natasha.
noches.
Good night.
Amazing.
you.
Beautiful.
Thank
Much
you.
love.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Good night. Good night, all.
Night, everyone.
I dodged a bullet, went straight to battle ghetto. On the beach, I watched the sunrise. Slept beneath the dipper. You bet a little silly, try to underneath the ninja. I can tip you for the devil's work, but I'm immune against your curse. Grab your purse, it's time to get the step. And I believe in no mistakes. See, everything to me's a lesson. But the violence of his mastery, the words are half a half of me. Every disrespect, that's blasphemy. Thank you for setting me free. Thank you for letting me be. Thank you for setting me free. Thank you for setting me free. Thank you for letting me be. Thank you for setting me free. I never thought I'd be. Thank you for setting me free. Telling my tears. Thank you for letting me be. Wishing on what could be. Thank you for setting me free. Riding through our memory. Thank you for letting me be. Thank you for setting me free. Thank you for letting me be. Thank you for setting me free. Thank you for setting me free. Thank you for letting me be. Thank you for setting me free. You don't seem to need it. Thank you for setting me free. Your eloquence, my team. Thank you for letting me be. Lost within my tree. Thank you for setting me free. Grateful that you freed me. Thank you for letting me be. Thank you for setting me free. Thank you for letting me be.
I think you have to stop the live stream.
Thank you for setting me free. Thank you for letting me be. Thank you for setting me free. Don't be good to talk me, be great. I think it's government shit. I need to stay. The music was so good, you feel it and get a taste. Blinders was all down, get it on city race. I ain't tripping, I'm saying.
Should I keep playing this?
You have to stop the live stream.
Wait, what you doing? I was